Hello friends, this is Govan here. One of my biggest, I don't want to say pet peeve, that's an overused term, but one of my biggest irritations or just general perceptions of people's difficulties and ability to misconstrue political ideas is in their lack of ability to break down and describe a political party or political system and what it exactly is. You hear terms, blanket terms thrown out all the time that end up becoming almost like colloquialisms for things that people don't like in general as a culture, as a society, and then things people are fine with. So fascist is a colloquial term. Most people don't even understand the specific aspects of what creates the fascist ideology if you've never even just simply read the Wikipedia definition of it. Probably the most glaring example is the classification of the Nazis as right-wing. Partly I think that is the historical perception of Nazism being in direct contrast with communism because they were fighting in Germany at the time that Nazi was around, the Russian communists, and the Red Army that was trying to impose itself. Even before the rise of Nazis, that was quite apparent and was gaining ground within Germany. But no, you don't have to have two diametrically opposed polarities of ideas in order for them to be in conflict. You look at the conflicts within certain groups, they exist all the time, whether it's the takeover of one faction against another. Chairman Mao was very paranoid at varying times in his career of takeovers from lower factions and groups within once they'd established themselves. And yeah, that exists everywhere. So in reality, if we do talk about Nazi Germany, there's many aspects of their policies which were very collectivized. They would be classified as extremely left-wing. And even in historical evidence, Hitler was very left-wing, and a lot of his generals were more right-wing, economically speaking, and they were often in disagreement with his very lavish welfare policies as well as corporate takeover of the industries that existed in Germany at the time. But that aside, I want to first talk about how to accurately break down any political ideology to really understand it. Because anyone speaking simply about right versus left doesn't know what they're talking about, flat out. Political ideologies and ways in which political systems work are far more complex than being right versus left, because every component of what they believe can be classified on a spectrum. You might be familiar with this as a more evolved way of looking at politics and political systems, and it's true, it's better. You have the vertical axis of authoritarian versus more libertarian, and that is a very good way to understand a more diverse array of views within a political group. It gives a more accurate understanding. But we can take it further still. For one, I think there's a problem with the vertical and horizontal XY axis, and I think it needs to be put on its side more like this picture, because, and without going into too much depth and making this video too long, collectivism or more left-leaning ideas are inherently authoritarian. You can't have left-leaning ideas extend beyond a certain size of group. So a lot of people think about tribal groups and how they were very egalitarian. Yes, within their group of people who are of the exact same ethnic origins and were often even very close family. So by that argument, yes, when people are very close-knit, especially if they have family bonds, they've intermarried, and they're all the same race, because as people don't like to admit, race is a factor in group identity. Yeah, you can get along very easily and you can be completely fine and prosper with redistribution because people all agree that that's the way to do things. But when you have all these different factors that might differ, and as the group gets too big for people that might be having their resources taken away and given to this group because they're, for whatever reason, less affluent in their lives, that starts to create problems within the group, and conflict will always come about as a result and will grow over time if not addressed. So, with that aside, you can start to understand why left-leaning ideas tend towards more authoritarianism on this graph, and the more right a group is, tends to be more towards liberty, but you can have authoritarian right-wing ideas. But at the very pinnacle of freedom, you have right-leaning ideas of property rights and the freedom to do whatever you want as long as it doesn't impinge on someone else's freedom. So with this graph in mind, you can actually take that and apply it to each and every policy or stance in a political party. So if we take different parties that are around today, the average of all their ideas might exist somewhere on that graph. But if you look at individual policies, they could exist in a different place. The overall perception of the party is the average of all those things. Looking at a lot of modern conservatives today, they might exist on fairly low authoritarianism, right-wing ideas when it comes to a whole assortment of things, but on a few very key issues such as military and individual freedoms of abortion or who you marry, etc., they exist in far more authoritarian territory. Now, where this is handy to understand things is a lot of people perceive the Nazis, going back to Nazi Germany, they perceive them as very right-wing, when overall they're not, but their one area of their policies could be described as right-wing because they had a lot of incentive to just support and grow and bring prosperity to a very specific ethnic group within the country. And yes, that can be classified as a very right-leaning idea, whereas the extreme opposite, which is absolute diversity, where there's no acknowledgement of the differences between people of different ethnic backgrounds, comes out of Marxism, essentially. That multiculturalist, diversity type mindset. I think there's absolutely problems with the extremes of either case, but trying to identify the Nazis as right-wing just because of that one aspect, when everything else about their party was very left-wing. When we see terms like fascism and Nazism being thrown as labels onto conservatives, as well as libertarians, right-leaning libertarians, it's just inaccurate. And it goes to show that people haven't taken the time to think these things through and really analyze their ideas and conclusions about how to describe and understand political systems. So it's quite impractical, obviously, to break down, just in casual conversation, each and every political idea in this way, but you can do that on your own and you can figure out where a party lines up and make your own conclusions from there. To give another more modern example of where people get mixed up, I think, I don't know all the aspects of the platform of this party, but recently in Alberta there was a change of political system on the provincial level in Alberta, Canada, and a very left-leaning party has come to power after like 40 plus years of the Conservatives being in power. The Conservatives become just completely corrupt. But there was an alternative, and it was a little more libertarian, the Wild Rose Party. But because of some things that they said, or perhaps was in their policies around being anti-abortion and perhaps anti-gay marriage, I'm not totally sure on that, that revealed something that a lot of people didn't want to bring into power, despite the fact that their fiscal policies would have been far better for Alberta than the current NDP government. We're going to see some bad things from that, I believe, and I'm going to predict. But yeah, if you were to break down each aspect of the Wild Rose Party in that diagram, you'd see a lot of it being much closer to the anarcho-capitalist or libertarian area of the whole diagram, and then that one aspect, or that aspect of the policies on those particular social issues, was far more authoritarian and right-leaning authoritarian. So let me know if you've ever thought about things in this way in the comments below, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye now.